Hey, everybody. In today's episode, we're bringing our special guest, Anthony, to talk about his time as both a coach and a physical therapist. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Let's Talk DAT. I'm Josh Profit, and today I have with me Anthony. Hello, Anthony.
Hey, Josh.
Um, from my understanding, you are both a coach and a PT. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Can you give me a little bit of backstory about yourself, who you are, what you do, and how long have you done it?
Yeah, so my name is Anthony. I'm a physical therapist. I've been practicing for about 2.5 years now. I graduated from Marymount University in Arlington, Virginia, with my doctorate in PT. And then I also went to Coker University down in South Carolina for my bachelor's degree, which I have a bachelor in arts in exercise science and a minor in Spanish. And I also played college lacrosse at Coker University while I was there. And then coaching wise, I've been coaching for around 9 years now.
Okay.
10 years on and off, some side gigs, some for school systems, and some internationally as well.
What sports?
Mainly lacrosse.
Okay. Okay.
Mainly lacrosse, just because I've played since I was 9.
Yeah.
So lacrosse is the main sport that I coach, especially goalies, but um, definitely anybody on the lacrosse field. Love to interact with, love to coach with. So it's a lot of fun. And I've gone back, I've helped a little bit on football teams, helped out some with wrestling teams as well. Those are the three sports that I played in high school. So
Yeah.
I give back for
Do you
sure.
think that's what influenced you to become a coach is the athlete, like the athlete in you, would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. When the career finally ends or comes to an end, in the competitive nature that
Mhm.
I was at, it's hard to really shake that, to
Mhm.
have it be completely stopped. So for me, I was like, I've got to be involved in some way. Uh,
Right.
and even when I was, at an athlete in school, there was still this drive to give back to the community, to see that spark in kids that I had when I was growing up, for somebody to come over and teach me a couple things, just, even lacrosse wise, how to catch the ball, how to cradle, how to do some of
Hmm.
the basics. So really enjoy coaching kids, but then all levels too.
Hmm. So you have had the opportunity to coach at each level in a way.
Yes. Yes, I have. Yeah. So I've coached, kids as young as about 4 to 5 years old,
Hmm.
and as old, I'd say around 30s or so.
Wow.
Um, and that old. So when I was at Coker, I actually had the opportunity to study abroad in Costa Rica. And so when I was there, and that kind of kickstarted my coaching career.
Yeah.
I was there, I reached out to their national lacrosse team, and they asked me to come and coach a clinic for them.
Hmm.
Uh, so I was super apprehensive because I didn't have a heck of a lot of coaching experience at that time.
Hmm.
They sent me the link for it. It was on Facebook at that time, and I saw that there's 150 people signed up. There's only one of me, so I was like, "Oh man, what am I gonna do?"
Uh-huh.
Uh, but it ended up all working out in the end, and thankfully, I was very happy. 150 people did not show up. It was around like 30, 35, but
Which is
that
still a pretty big number for one person.
yeah, it was wild, but I made sure I had a plan going into it. And I knew exactly what we are gonna do, and
Hmm.
it all worked out. But yeah, that was probably my first big experience with coaching a larger group, and then being able to coach not only men in their 30s, 20s, and
Yeah.
then even teenagers too. They're all trying out to be on this team, but also there's a big language barrier too, because
Hmm.
I was just learning Spanish at that time. And
How did you
but
overcome that, by the way?
so I had a couple guys that I knew that I met
Hmm.
in the city that I stayed with, who were bilingual. They knew nothing about lacrosse. They didn't even heard about it. They thought my they thought my lacrosse stick was a fishing net. They're like, oh yeah, we can go fishing if you want. I was like, no, no, it's so much more. Uh, so I had them actually come out with me. I asked them, and they came out, and so they helped me with the translations and things like that. And
Hmm.
being around maybe 2 hours worth I'd say, of coaching, doing the clinic for them. And that was great to see everybody come out and to actually see positive experience from that. But man, it was tough with all the planning and trying to not only, have the translators help me out, but to actually
Mm,
have the translators understand what we're trying to do as well.
yeah,
Because words don't translate too well. Because lacrosse isn't a big sport in Central
right,
America.
right.
But they're starting up and they're doing well so far. They're growing the game, which is awesome.
That's that's awesome. That's awesome. Now, to keep it into the coaching aspect of things, because I'd like to get to the medical aspect of things a little bit later.
Sure.
Um, what influences have coaches had on you, and then what influences do you think you have as a coach onto your athletes, positive or negative?
Yeah. So, coaches that I've had growing up, I've had some great coaches in my time. I can definitely say that I have had some coaches that maybe I wish I didn't have. But, in the end, one of the biggest things that I've seen from coaches is how much they push athletes to
Mm,
their limits and really show the athletes exactly what they can do. Playing football in high school, even till this day, I will always tell somebody that, college lacrosse, it was tough. But the coach that I had for high school football
mm,
was, he was a very intense guy, that's for sure. And he pushed us to the brink. But you know what? At the end of the day, we found out who we were as people,
mm,
not only on the athletic field, but with our families as well, because he pushed us to the brink of us trying to realize who we are. When you're digging deep, when you're hitting those runs, when you're pushing the weight room, things like that, it's,
mm.
who are you? Are you going to be able to at least try and attempt it? Or are you going to give up before you even start? And he
Right.
really instilled all of that confidence in us that we can do these things, that, even the impossible task that we look at ahead of us, even just attempting it to try and get it done was a
Mm,
big accomplishment in itself. So,
yeah.
but that's a big positive influence on me with coaches trying to push me and my teammates to show us that we can do a lot more than we really think we can do.
Mm,
And on the other side, some negative things that I've had from coaches is, it's certainly okay to talk about issues and problems and how to fix things that happen on the field, on the mat, on the court, wherever it might be. But there's definitely been some times where I think athletes have been put down a little too much to the
mm,
point where, they're really looking at, quitting or, falling out of love and out of touch with the sport that they originally fell in love with. So with those negative experiences, with coaching for me moving forward, it's always trying to really instill positivity, even within negativity. Meaning, if there's an athlete that I see that, needs some work, or we need to really focus on other things, or maybe they're not doing the right things on the field at that time, it's always talking to them about, what the mistake was. And there's this big knowledge of performance. People will know, people get it.
yeah.
You either missed the shot or you made the shot. That's not the part that I really want to focus on. It's what happened in that moment and what happened leading up to that moment that maybe could have been different to achieve that goal. But, even when you talk about what needs to be done within that athlete at that time, I always try to follow up with some type of positivity.
Mm,
You get that, I guess, put in quotations, negativity out, but it's more of knowledge of the performance.
mm,
So they know the knowledge of result, but what's the knowledge of performance? And I think that's where, as coaches, we come into play um, big time. So, really going through and hitting hard with that athlete, hey, look, you missed it, but here's what you could have done better, but this is what you did great.
mm.
Let's do that again, but let's change some things around.
Yeah. Kind
So,
of not necessarily leading with the negativity, but backing up the negative with the positive is what you're saying.
correct. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's a big thing psychologically for an athlete. I know for myself,
Mhm.
I've been in tough situations, on the field, off the field, and, you hear a lot of negativity some places. But when you hear that one little spark of positivity, I think
Mhm.
that's what really keeps people going to say, hey, look, I didn't just screw up the whole play. There was something positive that I did.
Mhm.
And that's what keeps those kids, that keeps players, whoever it might be, motivated to keep going. Say, hey, look, it wasn't all negative. There was some bit of positivity. And, I think it doesn't matter what the play is, who they are, you can find some positive aspect, even if it's just the attitude of the player. Saying, hey,
Absolutely.
look, thanks for getting off the field and, coming and hustling off.
Yeah.
Even if it's just something like that, that's a positive reinforcement for that player to say, hey, look, man, it's okay. You'll get the next one. You'll get more opportunities.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. One thing I also want to look at too is like what are the influences that from a coaching perspective you have of the players off the field? Like in, let's say, personalized, I know personally I work in a collegiate setting,
Mhm.
so our coaches are working with our athletes constantly, whether it's on field, off field, in the weight room, during meetings, things like that, constant communication. So I was just thinking from your perspective, what are some of those influences that you have off the field too?
Off the field. Are you talking about the players that aren't mainly starting on the field?
Well, I mean, like from a day-to-day standpoint, like do you feel like you have an influence over the athletes that you work with lives in their daily lives that's not necessarily strategically sport related?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's a lot of things in terms of community outreach, which I think are very important in
Mhm.
kids' lives, especially, getting out, getting into the community and actually seeing what is going on in your hometown, in your home city, or, even if it's a different place where you go to school. Um, those aspects I feel like we don't see very regularly. And to get those athletes out away from the athletic environment can be really important for them to see. For example, in college, we would partner with organizations to go out and help people paint walls in their homes that couldn't afford it. Activities like that and influence on their lives itself to show them, it's not just a closed world of, sport. It's not just a closed world of, academics. There's so much more beyond that. And in terms of influence and things like that is, I always make it a point to talk to people about, what their goals are, what do they want to achieve in life afterwards, because athletes, we can all be athletes throughout life, but there's only a short period of time where we're athletes in a very competitive group. And whether that's college athlete, professional, high school, youth, we only have so long to be able to achieve that. And then beyond that, there's so much more to life. So when it comes to those athletes beyond the athletic field, there's so much more to experience, such as, getting out just in the community and trying something new. And change is tough. New things are tough, for everybody. But when you have a sense of community around you, such as a team, it could be even a friend, a coach, to get you out and try something new and do something that you wouldn't typically do on a regular basis, I think is so important. And just being there, I think from a coaching standpoint for those players who want to do things,
Mhm.
super, super helpful, not only for your team, but also for you as a coach to grow.
Yeah.
Because I've had athletes come up and say, hey, look, we want to do this fundraiser. We want to do this community outreach. We want to help in the school system in this way. And I'm all for it as long as it doesn't impact practice time or game times. That's all.
Yes.
But in the off season or if it's on the weekend for a high school team, something like that, like I'm all about it. Getting out in the community outreach and something that I really encourage for athletes to do because there's so much more beyond just the close knit community of athletes.
Mhm. And that's awesome. So thank you.
Mhm.
Um, Part of it too that I want to look at is I want to also look at this from a medical perspective in line with the way thinking like a coach. So a lot of times I know I've had places where from an athletic trainer, uh, I've had places where I've had bad experiences with coaches who maybe don't quite understand the medical field. and ones who really respect their athletic trainers and their decision making on the field. And so part of what we're thinking is when you have an instance of an injury on the field, or like let's say a star player goes out, what experience have you had from a coach, as a coach, with maybe an athletic trainer that could be positive or negative?
Yeah, so I mean, I can certainly give you an example of each. I've had really positive experiences with some amazing athletic trainers who are out there who will, go out to the field. If somebody goes down, they'll come to the sidelines and they'll say, "Hey, look, I don't think this athlete's going to play the rest of the game, and here's why. And this is my thought process, and this is how he's feeling." And I'll definitely take that as a real positive for me, because now I know what's the update on that player. Is he going to be able to come back into the game or not? And what's going on with him specifically? So those things, as a coach and as a medical professional, I really appreciate getting that communication, especially because it happens so quick. And, there's points where, you know, it's like I kind of want to jump out there every once in a while,
Yeah, yeah,
and just see, what's going on and be in the mix. And as a coach, to go on the field, yeah, I could do that. Absolutely. And I do that, but
mm,
I don't do it trying to take over from an athletic trainer standpoint at all. You
yeah,
know, I want to go out there and I just want to be in the mix to see, what are they doing with the athlete, how the athlete is responding. And, sometimes with athletic trainers, especially in some counties that we have in Maryland, there's a bit of a shortage for sure. So
mm,
getting out there, that athlete may not know who that athletic trainer is, but
yeah,
they know who I am.
yeah,
So going out there gives them a bit of a sense of comfortability, knowing that there's a familiar face out there with them, and
mm,
they're in a vulnerable point. They're in a vulnerable state at that moment. But in terms of the interactions with, athletic trainers in a positive aspect, their line of communication, when that's open and that's
mm,
positive, and they come up and they can really talk me through things, and they can explain things not only in layman's terms, but also in medical terms that we both understand. I think that's a really big positive impact to me.
mm,
Um, you know, Negative wise, there's been some instances where, um, the athlete will have an injury, they'll go see somebody, and maybe someone's opinion might be a little different from mine, which is totally okay. But there won't be any explanation on why, or
mm,
the thought process on, yeah, they do need to sit out for maybe a week or maybe a game or something like that. And, you might see the athlete running around during, PE class or something like that. I'm like, what are you doing? you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
And I'm just like, does it hurt at all? And they're like, no, it's fine. And I'm like, man, we should get you back on the field then, and but at that same time, it's, what is going on specifically. I trust the athletic trainer, but just knowing what the explanation is on, what the thought process is behind, keeping athletes out, or rehab process, or what they need. I think
mm,
one of the biggest faults that I've come um, into um, really communication with is that lack of knowledge that I get between athletic trainer and coach, and then coach also knowing a little bit more than the average bear.
yeah. So to go off of that a little bit, I know
Mhm,
that from a return to play standpoint,
mhm,
we, or at least in the collegiate setting where I work at, and I know it differed when I was working in a secondary school, and it also differed when I was helping out professionally as well. And so at each stage, the communication of return to play was slightly different. So I know that in a lot of the secondary schools, there wasn't as good, I would say, of a communication between the coach and athletic trainer, just because a lot of that time that athletic trainer might be working like 5 or 6 different sports. That communication could get a little bit lost.
right.
And a lot of the injuries that you're seeing, you're not necessarily treating um, the same way just because of the resources and what you have. So a lot of the guys who are long-term patients are usually getting treated in like a physical therapy clinic
Mhm,
versus in the athletic training room itself. And it's been a couple of years since I've worked in the secondary school setting, so that might have changed a little bit. But from the collegiate setting, like we work on our guys almost every day. And so fortunately I get to work only one sport. So working football, I have a bunch of guys that come to me, and as I work them back into practice, like we have an injury report that goes to the coaches. They see this guy is either yes or he's a no, or he's a limited in practice. And so when we do this, it kind of that's my way of communicating to the coaches. But I know we kind of have some back and forth from time to time. Let's say somebody's coming back from a hamstring strain.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the times, like the coach can see that person running around, kind of like in the example you gave about the PE class, like he can see him running around. It's like, well, if he's running, why can't he run with the team? And it's like, well, he can't run at the same level of competition as the team without re-injuring himself. And so what we wanted to do, and this is that communication key, is what we want to do is make sure that we are progressing him at a level in which he's going to heal while also maintaining what he has and not losing uh, any either cardiovascular or muscle. Don't have a good word for it, but skill is what I'll use.
Sure,
And
sure.
so um, and I know for me, I have a great coaching staff when it comes to trying to communicate um, issues and that they respect my opinion. But I definitely have had some coaches who, where I've said that same thing to, they're like, so
Mhm.
they can go, and I'm like, no, I can explain it to you again. But and I
Yeah.
guess for me, going from a coach to me, my way of maybe progressing myself is maybe trying to use better terminology. Would you say, like, to get better at communicating would be maybe thinking of what they might know from a medical standpoint and then trying to communicate better? Or what advice could you give me in order to communicate better to coaches?
Yeah. So oh man, it's kind of a hard question to answer. And,
That's okay.
for me, I think it's a tough question because, as a physical therapist, I feel like I want more of an in-depth
Mhm.
answer.
Right.
Um, but from a coach who doesn't have a medical background, to discuss kind of in layman's term, I think would be very appropriate with them. But for
Mm.
me, because that's my spark, I enjoy working with athletes in the clinic, and I want to know more and more and more,
Right.
to kind of see where we're at, and I want to be a part of the process in terms of knowing where we're at and where we need to go, and what we need to do to get there. But for another coach, I've seen other coaches just kind of say, okay, whether they don't really need explanations on
Yeah.
what the thought is from athletic trainer, with can they go, can they not go, or
Mm.
are they practicing limited or playing limited,
Mm.
which I think is appropriate. But I've also seen other coaches be not very nice with athletic trainers, especially if it's an athlete who is a standout player, because they always want them out there on the field, on the court. And, sometimes when they get the news that they're limited or they can't play, they don't take it too well. So actually, feel for you guys.
Mm.
um,
Yeah.
that's for sure, because when you get that interaction with a coach that's maybe on an opposing team or something like that, and you're like, yeah, it's not going to work. I
Yeah.
could see emotions flaring up for sure, and I've seen it. Um, so you guys, I think, have the tough job, especially in game, on the field, whatever it might be, opposing team, same team, whatever it might be.
Mm.
Uh, that's just tough in terms of you all in communication. I mean, how do you deal with that when you have someone difficult that you're interacting with from an athletic trainer standpoint?
Yeah. So a lot of the times when I've had a difficult situation, it is usually a term of I need to get this person back in. Like, let's say it's a concussion or something. They're like, I need to get this person back in the game. Like, they are a star player. I need them. And from my standpoint, I just have to make sure that I am fighting for the patient because, or for let's say a concussion point, if I put them back in the game, if I have not fully ruled in or ruled out a concussion, I could be putting them back in to get second impact syndrome. I could
Hmm.
be putting them back in to get unconscious, knocked out. They could, even the worst case scenario, they could die, right? And out of all of those things, that makes me liable. And so I'm not only protecting myself, but I'm also looking out for the best care that I can give that patient. And so if that is not playing because of their injury, then I'm going to fight to keep them out. And at the end of the day, when it comes to the medical aspect of these patients, my word is final. And so
Yeah.
whether the coach agrees with me or not, they're going to eventually have to get over it. And so it
Yeah,
has
absolutely.
in times gotten to the point where there has been verbal altercations of like you have to kind of just be bigger than the other person,
Right.
and eventually they're either going to listen or they'll get fed up. But that's when we kind of get into our present issue with like the medical. We have different medical models and athletic training, and I don't know how that works in the physical therapy realm, and I'd like to get back to that in a little bit.
Yeah,
But
sure.
um, from an athletic training perspective, part of what we see is problems with is something called the athletics model or academic model, where uh, the coaches are, or your administrative staff, like your athletic director, is the people who are overseeing your, like I would report to the athletic director instead of, and where I work now is kind of a medical model in a term of I report to our medical director, who's our team physician.
Hmm.
And so in the event where I'm reporting to my athletic director, they may ask me to go based off of what the coach wants rather than what I think is best. And so a lot of
Okay.
times we see that, especially in like a professional setting, where a head coach doesn't like an athletic trainer and now they're like, oh, I don't like this. We will try to find someone new who will kind of push what we want.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're trying to go away from a little bit, is making sure that we have the autonomy and authority to be able to provide care without the fear that our job is in jeopardy of because it's not aligning with having this person playing all the time,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It absolutely
So,
does.
but what I'm curious is more of the physical therapy side of what you do. So, obviously, you are a physical therapist. What kind of got you into physical therapy?
Oh man. Well, when when I was a kid, my grandmother actually had a stroke, and I
Mm,
saw that. And I was young. I was around 10 years old or so. And um, we went up and I saw her, and the physical therapist who was working with her started actually integrating me within the rehab process. It could be something simple too, just as simple as throwing a ball to me so I could throw it back,
yeah.
or just being present there with her. And I got
Mm,
to see them do all these things. And unfortunately, she passed away a couple weeks after that point. But those physical therapists, they showed up at the funeral. They were there.
yeah.
And to me, seeing that as a kid, that was a huge impact. And, you know, at that point, I didn't know I wanted to be a physical therapist. I just knew how much a physical therapist impacted my life
Yeah.
and how much they did for my family.
Yeah.
Uh, so as I kept going on in college, I started college. I didn't had no idea what I was going to do. I sat
Mm,
down for the very first class. It was I'll never forget. It's a Psych 101 course that I took in college. I sat down, and a teammate of mine came up, and he was an upperclassman, and I asked him what he wanted to do, and he
mm.
said, "Oh, I want to be a physical therapist." And I was like, "Huh, I think I could do that." So I went back to my dorm and looked up what's it going to take to be a physical therapist and what's the schooling, and
Mm,
everything started lining up. Like, oh man, I could work with athletes. I get
mm,
this higher level of education that I've been looking for. I get to work with the general public who are in need of care from more of a holistic
mm,
approach, which to me that was amazing. And then all of those times when I was a kid that I that I realized hey, this is truly, I think, my calling, and this is what I want to do.
Mm.
Uh, because if I can make that big of an impact that someone made on me when I was just a kid, and I'd still remember that all throughout growing up, even to now, if I can do that, if I could change somebody's life in that way, then I'll make this world a bit of a better place.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
absolutely.
So how do you think that medical side of things uh, influences your coaching differently than if you had not had the medical background?
Oh man. Well, I think that from a strength and conditioning standpoint, it has impacted care a lot, um, impacted coaching a lot, because I use things that I do in coaching in the PT realm, and I
Mm,
use things from the PT realm in coaching all the time,
mm,
to a point where it might be almost a little fluid,
mm.
too fluid.
Yeah.
But from a strength and conditioning standpoint, knowing that getting the athletes ready and primed for sport and getting them ready for practice, getting them ready to be able to perform, I take that knowledge base of physical therapy and what is needed to help that athlete perform on the field, and we integrate it into preseason, into the regular season, and getting the guys or girls to realize, hey, look, something as simple as strength training should
Mm.
be done in season. It doesn't
Right.
just start and stop in the off season, and that's one of the most simplistic things that I think that I have brought from that PT realm. And even when I was in high school, we barely weight trained at all with any
Mm.
sport in season because we're always told not to. And I'm thinking, what's the deal? Now that I'm a PT, I've gone through the education, the schooling, and all that stuff. I'm like, man, we should still be lifting. We should still be training. We should be getting ready and primed. Now, the way we lift is going to be a lot different off season versus in season. And
Absolutely.
that's how we go through it, or that's how I go through it with the athletes. Like, hey, look, we're lifting right now for maintenance because we need to be continuously strong out there on the field. And we may not be lifting, you know 4 times a week, 5 times a week in season, but we're getting some lifting in.
Mm.
um, but having that fluidity between a PT realm and a coaching standpoint, knowing that these players need more strength and conditioning, they need more athletic performance, even if it's from a warm-up standpoint, such as with the lacrosse realm, it's such a rotational sport. And thinking about how that really translates into the clinic too is when I look at all these athletes that I see in the clinic and I look at all these athletes on the field, it's what do they need to perform. So I look at my buckets. When I treat in the clinic, I pull from what I call the buckets,
Yeah.
which are, something rotational, something sagittal, some squat, some hinge, some type of push and pull, not only going from, those movements, but what planes of motion am I in? They need to
Mm.
be hitting every single plane of motion. They need to be hitting every type of movement possible because even running, people are like, well, why am I doing all this rotational stuff? I'm like, because you rotate when you run.
Hmm.
So taking all of those, that knowledge base and pulling from all these buckets and integrating that into the athlete, not only from a rehab standpoint, but from a coaching standpoint too, I think it's just
Mm.
helped with, from a lacrosse standpoint, doing something simple as, open books and cat cows,
Right.
just as a warm up to get that rotational aspect in, just on the field to be able to get them to maybe even get a little bit more torque within their shot, something along those lines
Mm.
is is really impactful, I think, and something that is really valuable that can be brought to the table that I think not a lot of people have a big knowledge base of. And I wish we did have more of a knowledge base of that as coaches.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Um, so we're gonna take a pause real quick, because
Sure.
I don't have the full length version or like the paid for version of Zoom.
Oh yeah,
And
it's all
so we
good.
have, yeah, we have 2 minutes of this Zoom. So I was like, I'm telling this for Mike right now because Mike's editing the video. If you
Okay.
want to edit the last 2 minutes of this out, and then so I don't have any other questions, but I would like to have you for a conclusion
Sure.
of the episode. So, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to end the recording and the Zoom, and then
Mhm.
if you want to go through the same link that I sent you earlier,
Mhm.
we'll just hop back on, and then it'll reset, and we can do it again. And it will just be probably, I would say, five-ish more minutes, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. And I'll see you in just a second then. Anthony, I thank you for your time today. Do you have any other final thoughts that you would like to add?
I don't, but I just want to say thank you for having me on here.
Of
Thanks
course.
for your time, and I had a
Yeah.
pleasure doing this with you.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure having you on, and thank you for your expertise. And I hope the rest of your season, as well as your time in your physical therapy life, goes well as well.
Thank you so much.
So,
Same to you.
so thank you very much. In the next episode, we'll be talking about coaches' influence on athletic trainers' job security. Stay tuned.